Hey, tonight we're exploring disturbing ancient practices we secretly still use today. The air is cool tonight. You drift across a quiet plain, the ground soft beneath your feet. Hills rise gently in the distance, but not all of them are just hills. Some are barrows, hollowed earth packed with bone and stone, built by hands long turned to dust. You imagine those hands, carefully placing bodies in the earth, adding trinkets or animal bones, whispering prayers or curses to the soil. You don't know what was said or what the silence meant, but the earth remembers. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy quiet stories like this. And if you're still awake, feel free to post your local time and where you're listening from. It's always nice to know who else is out there in the dark with you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully between stones half buried in moss. There's a scent of old grass and damp clay. The places once used for rituals, for sacrifices, burials, initiations, they're all around us, even if we don't call them that anymore. You pass a modern graveyard with manicured lawns, and suddenly the lines blur. Is there much difference between an ancient offering pit and a cemetery plot with a bronze plaque? In Neolithic Europe, burial mounds weren't just graves. They were entryways. Portals, perhaps, between the world of the living and whatever came next. Bodies weren't always buried. Sometimes they were placed on high wooden platforms, left for the birds and weather to strip clean. A practice called excarnation. The bones, once bare, would be moved into small chambers underground. Quiet, hidden, permanent. Your mind drifts to something quieter, the way hospitals now treat death. The way we tuck people away in clean rooms behind curtains. We don't put them on wooden towers anymore, but we do move them, from home to hospital to mortuary, carefully, politely, at a distance. In 1999, researchers uncovered a site in northern Germany called the Ring of Ditches, dating back nearly 7,000 years. Within the ring were pits full of dismembered human remains, arms, legs, skulls arranged deliberately. No sign of mass violence, no collapse of a roof, just arrangement. It looked like a message or a ritual, but one we can't decode. Some think it was cannibalism. Others say it was a complex mourning rite. We're left with the puzzle, and even now, we have those. When a disaster happens, an earthquake, a plane crash, we carefully separate body parts for identification. Science replaces ritual. But the precision, the care, it's not so different. You pass a forest where early Celtic tribes once performed bog burials. People, often young, often bound, were laid in marshes and sunk beneath the mud, perfectly preserved for millennia. We find them curled, almost peaceful. But we know they weren't. And yet today, some cultures still bury their dead with specific natural elements, water, salt, fire, or earth, based on what they believe the soul needs to journey on. The marshes just became cemeteries. The tools became more sterile. But the longing, to honor, to transition, to send someone somewhere else, that stayed. A study published in Antiquity found a peculiar pattern. Almost all early human societies practiced structured burial, even before agriculture. That means before we planted food, we were burying our dead in specific ways, with trinkets, with stones, with intention. You think about what that says, that before we learned how to live, we were learning how to die. And maybe that's why the land feels so heavy sometimes. Beneath the paved roads and bright cities, there's memory. In cities like London, layers of the dead pile under the living. The Romans, the Victorians, the plague years. Some neighborhoods rest atop forgotten cemeteries, barely a marker left. And we build anyway. Hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, right above. There's something eerie, but also strangely human about it. We keep moving forward, but never far from the dead. In 2015, workers digging a new subway line in Paris unearthed a series of medieval mass graves, bodies layered like pages in a book, each chapter marked by a different disease. The workers kept digging. The trains run on time. You pause here and listen. There's no wind, just the feeling of presence, of being watched or remembered. It's not fear, just recognition. The earth carries all of this with it, and you walk across it every day. You wonder, if the old rituals shaped the land, then maybe they shaped us too. Maybe the way you avoid walking across a grave, or pause before stepping into a church, or feel uneasy near a deep forest, maybe that's memory too. Not your own, but something older, quieter, passed down through motion and instinct. Researchers still debate why ancient people performed such elaborate burial rites. Was it religion, social order, fear, love, or maybe the reasons don't matter anymore? Maybe the feeling is the point. You walk a little further. The ground shifts underfoot, softer now, like it's been loosened. Somewhere nearby, a ritual once took place. Something final, but not forgotten. You keep walking. The night air is still gentle, carrying with it the faint scent of something metallic. It's not sharp, not threatening, more like the distant echo of a hospital hallway. Clean, sterile, and quiet. You glance down, and for a moment, the ground beneath your feet feels like smooth tile, fluorescent lit from above. Then it shifts again, and you're back on a path of earth and stone. There's something ancient and unsettling about the tools we've used to heal. Long before scalpels glinted under surgical lights, there were knives carved from obsidian, bone needles for stitching wounds, heated irons to cauterize infection. And always, the belief that pain might be necessary. That to cut was to cleanse. You feel your hand brush an imaginary line across your side. An incision. It doesn't hurt, not here. But the memory is there, even if it's not yours. Something deeper than memory, maybe. Something inherited. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, physicians were also priests. They believed illness was caused by evil spirits or divine punishment. So healing involved more than just herbs. It involved ritual cutting, a small slit to release the spirit, bloodletting, scarification, a mix of medicine and magic, inseparable. Now you walk past a modern surgical ward in your mind. White coats, masked faces, gloves, the tools are cleaner, the cuts are neater. But the principle is surprisingly similar. Open the body, remove the cause, stitch it shut. Hope. In the ancient city of Corral, archaeologists found bone tools near remains with deliberate cranial holes. Trepanation, the practice of cutting a hole in the skull, has existed on nearly every continent. Not to kill, but to heal. For seizures, for headaches, for something spiritual. The thought of it makes your temples ache. But in modern times, we still perform craniotomies for tumors, pressure, or injury. The reasons are different, the methods more refined, but the whole is still a whole. A quietly fascinating fact: obsidian scalpels, made from volcanic glass, are still sharper than surgical steel. So sharp, in fact, they can slice individual cells without damaging surrounding tissue. Some researchers argue they should be reintroduced. Something primitive, outperforming the modern. And there's something poetic about that, the way the oldest tool might still be the best. You walk past a shadow that flickers like an operating lamp. Bright, then gone. In medieval Europe, bloodletting was common practice. Doctors used leeches or small blades to remove what they believed was bad blood. The theory was humoral: 4 fluids in balance: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. Illness meant imbalance. Cutting meant correction. You'd think we left that behind. But think of the detox cleanses, of dry cupping, of treatments that promised to draw out toxins. The vocabulary changed. The instinct did not. Today, we still open the body to treat it. Heart bypasses, tumor resections, laparoscopy. You sign the form. You lie down. You let someone cut you open with precision, not because you want to, but because deep down you still believe. To heal, we must go through the wound. And somewhere in that belief is a memory of a time when the village healer sharpened a stone blade and whispered over your skin. You pause. There's a story whispered in the dust about the Aztecs, whose rituals involved cutting open the chest to offer the still beating heart to the gods. Horrific to imagine, unthinkable today. And yet, consider the organ donation form. You check a box, your body becomes useful after death. Not to gods, but to others. To science. To strangers. It's not the same, but it rhymes. You see a glint in the dark, and for a moment it looks like a scalpel. Then just a moonlit leaf. The mind fills in details the eyes barely see. There's an eerie detail in the way we now broadcast surgeries, on TV, in YouTube tutorials, even in VR simulations. Education, we say. Transparency. But there's something voyeuristic too. We still look at open bodies with a kind of awe. Not horror, not reverence, just fascination. We've normalized the cut and made it part of our stories. Researchers still wonder why early humans began performing trepanation without anesthesia, and why so many survived. The bone shows healing. The body adapted. Perhaps the brain accepts intrusion more willingly than we expect. Or maybe those who endured the procedure became mythologized, symbols of strength, vessels of wisdom. You wonder if that's still true. You think of scars, of how they once marked survivors, warriors, people who were touched by the sacred or by pain. Now we cover them, laser them away, or show them proudly. It depends. But the story of the cut is always there, hidden or shared. In some cultures, surgical scars are admired. In others, feared. In all, remembered. You walk a little farther now into a place that feels like the inside of a hospital, but made of stone. The walls are uneven, but cool. You pass a basin of water, clear and shallow. You see your reflection, and for a moment, your face looks marked. A line, faint and healed, across the temple. You blink. It's gone. You remember that even now, some rituals around surgery remain. We knock on wood before procedures. We light candles in waiting rooms. We write messages on the skin. Cut here. It's a strange mix of clinical and human, of control and fear. You wonder what future humans will think of our surgeries. Will they see them as barbaric, precise, necessary, or something in between? You keep walking, and the scent of steel fades. The stone hallway opens back to the night air. You're still whole. But you carry the memory of the knife, whether it's yours or someone else's. You step away from the scent of metal and find yourself in a quiet corridor. The air here is thick, still, like time has stopped moving. There are no windows, only smooth walls, carved by hands you'll never meet, in a place that remembers what it was made for. Your footsteps feel soft against the ground, muffled, and that silence presses in, not like absence, but like presence, a presence that listens. You're walking through a chamber meant to hold people, not objects. No furniture, no fire, just walls, stone or wood or padded cloth designed not to protect, but to isolate. Long ago, silence was a punishment. To be removed from the tribe, to be cast out, was worse than injury. In ancient Greece, exile was often considered a fate more severe than death. In many early societies, banishment wasn't about distance, it was about invisibility. You were to be forgotten, as if you never existed. You take a breath and the silence responds with nothing. A kind of soundlessness that makes your heart louder. In medieval monasteries, monks took vows of silence, days, sometimes weeks without speech. They believed silence brought them closer to the divine. But others, outside the monasteries, used silence differently. As penance, as control. If you sinned, you were denied speech. You couldn't speak your thoughts, your defense, or your apologies. Your tongue became your cell. In modern times, we no longer throw people into caves or silence them with ritual. But padded rooms still exist. Isolation chambers, psychiatric seclusion units. We say it's for safety. Sometimes it is, but the effect is strangely familiar. One quietly fascinating fact, studies on solitary confinement show that even after just a few days, the brain begins to change. Hallucinations, anxiety, time distortion. The mind, deprived of sound and social contact, bends inward, and not always gently. You reach out and run your hand along the wall. It's soft now, not stone, padded, soundproofed, like a sensory deprivation tank. No echoes, no friction, just the feeling of being inside yourself. And yet some people seek this. The flotation chambers, the silence retreats, the no-phone weekends in cabins far from cities. These are modern rituals of disconnection. Stillness as self-discovery. But it's not so far from the old caves, the ritual exiles, the monk cells. You pass a door. There's no handle on the inside, just a small circular window, fogged with breath. You don't see who's in there, but you feel them. In early China, there were punishment boxes made of bamboo, too small to stand, too narrow to lie down. You sat, cramped and still for days. It was called the cage of reflection, as if discomfort could produce wisdom. Now, we have timeout rooms, jail cells, even wellness centers that promise a day of silence. Reflection packaged and sold. You take another step and the air shifts, warmer now, like a breath on the back of your neck. But when you turn, there's nothing, just another room. Inside, a chair. Wooden, facing a blank wall. In schools during the 1800s, children were sometimes forced to wear dunce caps and sit silently in corners. Not to learn, but to be seen, humiliated, to internalize the silence. And now, we remove children from classrooms for quiet time. A softer name, a softer room. But the feeling remains. You're a part, not part of the rhythm anymore. Researchers still debate whether isolation helps or harms in rehabilitation. Some argue that structured solitude allows for introspection. Others point to the psychological damage, especially when it's not voluntary. The same debate existed in the 1700s when prisons shifted from public punishment to private confinement. They believed if you locked someone away with only their thoughts, they might find their soul again. But what if they didn't? You enter a space that feels even quieter, somehow more silent than silence. It reminds you of an anechoic chamber, a room designed to absorb all sound. In one of the most famous chambers at Orfield Labs in Minnesota, people can only stay inside for a few minutes. The silence becomes oppressive. You hear your own blood, your heartbeat, the sound of your eyelids moving, and eventually, your thoughts get louder than anything else. You pause there, not because you're afraid, but because something inside you understands what this space was meant to do. Not punish, not torture, reveal. In that silence, the mind opens its doors. Fears walk through. Memories you thought were buried float back up. You start to wonder if some ancient punishments weren't punishments at all, but transformations, a ritual of unmaking. In Native American traditions, vision quests often involved days alone, in nature, without food or company. Not as a test, but as a doorway. You were supposed to meet something in the silence. A spirit, a memory, a self. You wonder what you would meet, if left long enough. You keep walking, and the corridor opens at last. There's a breath of wind, just enough to remind you what motion feels like. You step out into the open, and the silence fades into the soft night noises around you. The rustle of trees, the distant chirp of something small, the beat of your own body. And you realize that silence is never absolute. Not in the body, not in the mind. It's only ever quiet enough to hear what you've been ignoring. The air changes again as you walk. It feels thicker now, almost humid. There's a faint trace of smoke in it, and something more difficult to place, a scent like old ink or iron, warmed by skin. You follow it like a thread through the dark until you find yourself standing before a figure. Not a person, not really. Just a shape etched into stone. Arms outstretched, skin carved with deliberate lines, symbols, spirals, eyes. You step closer, and without realizing, your own hands drift toward your arms, your shoulders, your chest. You imagine what it would feel like to be marked. Not by accident, not by harm, but by intention. All around the world, for thousands of years, people have chosen to alter their skin. Tattoos, scarification, branding, and pigmenting, not just for decoration, but for meaning, for memory, for protection, for status, for pain. In ancient Polynesia, tattoos weren't just art, they were living language. Your story, your family, your courage, inked into your body so that even in silence, others would know who you were. The word tattoo itself comes from tatau, which mimics the rhythmic sound of the tapping needle. You close your eyes, and in your imagination, you can almost hear it. The tap, tap, tap of bone tools against stretched skin. A ritual, a rite of passage. A mark that meant you had crossed a threshold. Childhood to adulthood, outsider to tribe, spirit to self. And now, you live in a world where tattoos are everywhere, in cafes, offices, airports, on teachers and musicians, on surgeons and soldiers. But the intent lingers. You might still get a symbol for protection, for grief, for a loved one lost. You might not speak of it, but it's there, under your shirt, or on your wrist, or across your spine. Quiet power. A quietly fascinating fact. Researchers in 2015 re-examined the mummy of Otzi the Iceman, frozen in the Alps over 5,000 years ago. They found 61 tattoos on his body, simple lines and crosses. Not for beauty, it seems, but placed along acupuncture-like points, possibly for pain relief, or maybe something more symbolic. The body as a canvas for healing. And yet even now, we mark our bodies when we're in pain. You think of people who cut their skin not for death, but for control, for feeling. A ritual of grounding in a world that feels too loud. Not so different, perhaps, from ancient rites meant to bring the spirit back into the body. Or consider medical tattoos. A small inked cross to guide radiotherapy. A line above the heart for pacemaker placement. Ink as a marker for healing. You run your hand along a smooth wall nearby and feel a shallow groove, the shape of a spiral, a symbol from the Bronze Age, still found today on jewelry, on doors, on skin. In West African traditions, scarification was both personal and tribal. Raised skin told a story of where you came from, what you had survived, who you belonged to. Sometimes done with thorns, sometimes heated metal, always done with care. And pain. Pain, in many cultures, was seen as necessary for transformation. You had to earn your new identity through endurance. Now you walk past a gym, a piercing studio, a row of online shopping tabs filled with shapewear and serums, different tools, but still the same echo. Change the body to reveal the self. There's an eerie detail in how certain ancient protective symbols, eyes, crosses, animal teeth, have simply migrated onto t-shirts, jewelry, phone cases. You wear them now like armor, even if you no longer know why. A Hamsa hand, a Nazar eye, a Celtic knot. We tell ourselves it's design. But symbols don't die, they just evolve. You pause at a pool of still water. The surface reflects your face, your shoulders, your neck. Unmarked, or maybe not. You think about the scars hidden beneath your clothes. Not just from surgery or injury, but from living, from believing, from becoming. Researchers still wonder how tattoos interact with the immune system. Some studies suggest that repeated tattooing strengthens your immune response over time, as if the body, once marked, becomes more alert, more alive, a kind of biochemical initiation. You wonder if the ancients somehow knew. In some traditions, the first tattoo is placed over the heart. In others, behind the ear, so the ancestors can whisper to you. In still others, on the spine, a symbol of carrying your story forward. And now you hear someone nearby, a soft voice, speaking through a buzzing needle. Breathe in, they say. Almost done. You pass them without looking. You know what they're doing. You know what it means, because we still mark ourselves for love, for mourning, for hope, for power. You see inked fingerprints on a memorial wall. You see couples with matching constellations. You see quiet men with the names of lost children hidden beneath their sleeves. You see belief, written in skin. The air softens again, the scent fades, and you feel the brush of your own fingertips on your wrist, a phantom touch where no ink lies. But the memory is there, maybe from another life, or maybe from something older than memory. You keep walking, your body your own, but never truly unmarked. You step out beneath an open sky. There's no moon tonight, but you feel its shape behind the clouds, a silver absence, a presence just out of reach. The air has changed again, cooler, thinner. You glance behind you, and for the first time, you wonder if you're being watched. Not in fear, not in danger, just that subtle pressure like someone is tracing your steps from a distance. A gaze you can't quite shake. And maybe that's the point. You walk slowly now, between stone pillars that seem placed with intent. Some lean, some crumble, but all of them feel arranged. You picture ancient temples, shrines, and thrones built to be seen from a distance, not just by people, but by gods, spirits, the dead. Always watching, always waiting. Across cultures, across centuries, the act of being watched has shaped behavior. In Egypt, the eye of Horus followed both the living and the dead. In Mesopotamia, temple idols were positioned so their gaze met yours. Unblinking, eternal. And today, cameras. The modern eye doesn't blink either. In the soft hum of a city, you pass under quiet lenses mounted to buildings, street corners, doorbells. They don't whisper judgment, but you feel their presence. You walk straighter. You move differently. You pretend you're alone, but your body already knows it isn't. A quietly fascinating fact. Psychologists have found that even a drawing of eyes, just two dots and a curve, can alter human behavior. In one experiment, people were more likely to clean up after themselves in a shared kitchen if a poster of eyes was on the wall. Not a camera, just the image of a gaze. The brain, it seems, doesn't need proof, just suggestion. And it goes deeper. In some ancient societies, the gaze was protection. Amulets with painted eyes were buried with the dead to guard them from evil. Children had eyes drawn on their cribs, not to scare, but to watch for them, to hold vigil when no one else could. You pause beneath a street lamp. The light flickers, casting a soft glow on the pavement. You stare up at the bulb, and for a moment, it feels like an eye itself, one that blinks slowly, not from lashes, but from failing circuitry. You wonder when watching became so quiet. In Rome, crowds filled the Colosseum, eyes trained on spectacle. Blood, glory, punishment, all played out for public consumption. That need to see, to witness, was part of the ritual, and the crowd believed their watching had weight. Their gaze gave the event meaning, finality. And now, you open your phone, you scroll, you watch a stranger fall, cry, confess, or transform. You witness the quiet violence of everyday life, flattened into content, but no less personal. Some scholars argue that modern surveillance is just a more polite form of ancient exposure. In medieval times, criminals were shackled in public squares, stocks, pillories, left not just to suffer, but to be seen. Eyes weren't passive, they were punishment. Now we stream courtroom trials, live stream arrests, we point cameras at protests, crimes, and grieving mothers. The methods have changed, but the ritual remains. And maybe you felt it too, that moment when you're caught looking, or being looked at, that subtle shift in posture. The sense that you're no longer just you're now being perceived. There's an eerie detail in how people behave under surveillance. Studies show that people under observation tend to conform more strictly to social norms, even if no one speaks to them. The presence of a watcher, even a silent one, changes everything. You walk past a wall where faces once stared out, ancient masks mounted in neat rows, carved expressions, open mouths, empty eyes. Some were funerary masks, others were worn by the living during ceremonies, but all of them were made to see and be seen. Today, our masks are different. Filtered photos, profile pictures, curated reflections. But the desire is the same, to control what's seen, to manage the gaze. Researchers still wonder about the psychological toll of constant surveillance, especially the kind we invite. Phones in every hand, facial recognition in every frame. We say it's convenient, safer, but deep down, something in us still flinches under the invisible stare. And yet, we need to be seen too. Infants who are not gazed at, not mirrored by a caregiver, develop differently. The eyes of the other help form the self. The earliest human bonding is eye contact. The first ritual of recognition. You sit down now, just for a moment, on a stone bench worn smooth by time, and you feel that odd pull again, not quite fear, not quite comfort, just the sense that something is bearing witness, that what you do, who you are, matters, because someone or something is watching. It could be a memory, it could be a camera, it could be a god. You don't need to know, you only need to feel it. You rise again. The air is still, but you move with a different awareness, not self-conscious, but seen. You pass beneath another light. This one doesn't flicker, it simply glows. And you keep walking, carrying the gaze with you. Not as a burden, but as a thread. You walk now through a narrowing path, and the scent shifts again. Dry wood, scorched air, something older, something burnt. You feel it before you see it. That soft, residual heat in the soil, like the afterglow of something recently extinguished. Then, ahead of you, firelight. Not roaring, not wild. Just a small flame, contained, breathing gently like something alive. You sit near it, careful not to disturb the air. And for a moment, you're not walking through history. You're sitting beside it. From the beginning, humans have gathered around flames. For warmth, yes. For cooking, but also for something deeper. Something we don't always name. Rituals of burning are among the oldest we know. Across cultures and continents, fire was a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. We burned offerings to gods. Letters to the dead, effigies of what we feared or hated or longed to release. Fire consumes, but it also transforms. In ancient Vedic rituals, ghee and grains were tossed into sacred flames while mantras were whispered. In Japan, paper talismans are burned during Ofuda ceremonies. In Celtic festivals like Beltane, whole fields were set alight in symbolic purging. The smoke lifted something invisible from the earth, fear, disease, winter. You look at the flame now and realize it's not destruction. It's translation, turning something you can't carry into something that can float away. A quietly fascinating fact. Fire is not a thing, but a process, a visible reaction where heat releases trapped energy in matter. What you see isn't an object, but transformation in real time, the dance of atoms letting go. And perhaps that's why fire is so deeply emotional. Because letting go is always hard. Even when it's just paper. You remember a tradition still alive today, burning joss paper in Chinese culture, paper replicas of money, clothes, even phones, meant to reach ancestors in the afterlife. Superstition, some say. But the act itself? The act feels deeply human. Even outside of religion, we burn to cope. People burn letters from past lovers, notes they never sent, photos that hurt to hold. Sometimes the burning is ceremonial. Candles lit at memorials. Sometimes it's spontaneous, a match, a lighter, a metal dish in a kitchen sink. But always it's release. You watch a leaf fall into the fire. It curls, blackens, and vanishes. No sound, no struggle, just transition. In parts of the ancient world, entire funeral pyres were built for those passing into the next life. Smoke carried the soul upward. Ashes returned to earth. In modern times, cremation is often seen as practical, but in India, it's still sacred. The flame must be lit by the eldest son. The body must burn entirely, or the spirit may not rest. You picture the shape of a body in firelight, not in pain, but in passage. Not death, but departure. And you remember how even now, people light candles in windows for those far away, for those not coming home. Fire marks absence, but also presence. You stand, and around you, the darkness pulses gently. You pass a wall of stone where ancient texts once declared that fire was a living being, with moods, with hunger, with will. In Zoroastrianism, fire is not a symbol, but a sacred entity. Temples hold it for decades, a single flame kept alive across generations. In some sense, you realize we've never stopped feeding the fire, only changed what we offer. Now we burn fuel for speed, convenience, light, gas stoves, car engines, incinerators. We feed fire with garbage, with energy, with time. But symbolically, we still give it more. Old journals, bits of hair, that shirt you couldn't keep anymore. The ritual isn't gone, it's just gone indoors. There's an eerie detail in how wildfires, despite their devastation, still serve a cleansing role in ecosystems. Some seeds won't germinate unless they've been scorched. Some forests won't regrow until the flames have passed through. And maybe people are the same. You remember a story about a town that, after a tragedy, held a silent bonfire. No speeches, no music, just the townspeople, one by one, placing things into the fire. Shoes, toys, lockets. There were no signs, just smoke. Researchers still study the psychological effect of symbolic burning. Why even small acts, like lighting a piece of paper and watching it turn to ash, can cause measurable decreases in anxiety. It seems our brains process it as real loss, real release. You crouch beside the fire now, watching it flicker and bow. You could toss something in, a thought, a worry, a name, even just in your mind. The fire will take it. That's what it does. You think about how fireworks, now a celebration, began as warding rituals. The noise and the flame were meant to scare away evil spirits. We've kept the spectacle, but forgotten the fear. And yet, maybe not entirely. People still fear fire, the loss it brings, the danger, the temptation, the warmth. It never stopped being sacred. We just stopped admitting it. You rise and feel the heat on your back as you walk away. A soft goodbye from the flame, and somewhere inside you, something lighter than before. The fire fades behind you, and the night stretches wider than before. But something lingers in the air. Not smoke now, but tension. A faint pull, like an old string tied to your chest. The kind of invisible thread that used to draw people into town squares, into coliseums, into crowds. You find yourself in an open space. Flat, quiet, centered. A place built for watching and being watched. There are no bleachers now, no guards or gallows. But the air remembers. The earth remembers. The way people once gathered to witness someone else's pain. You walk to the center, and for a moment you feel eyes on you again. Not divine, not mechanical, human, watching. There was a time when punishment was spectacle, not hidden behind prison doors or legal paperwork, but staged in the open. Stocks, whipping posts, branding irons, executions. The message wasn't just discipline, it was theater. And even now, it hasn't really gone away. A quietly fascinating fact, public shaming activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. MRI scans show that being humiliated, even digitally, lights up the body like a bruise. Our nervous systems don't distinguish between a slap and a crowd's contempt. You think about ancient Rome, the crowd roaring in the arena, not out of cruelty, but out of ritual. Watching wasn't passive, it was part of the sentence. Their gaze was a blade. Their voice, a verdict. Now the arena is different. It's digital. A comment section, a viral post, a leaked clip. The speed is faster, the echo is wider. But the impulse? The impulse is ancient. You walk past a stone wall and see etchings worn nearly smooth, symbols of justice, scales, swords, blindfolded eyes. And yet justice rarely came blind. The crowd always saw, always judged. In medieval Europe, people accused of crimes were paraded through town, shackled, shouted at, sometimes stoned. This wasn't just punishment, it was performance. Pain as proof. And now, mugshots go viral. Private emails become headlines. Apologies are demanded and devoured in front of millions. You wonder if we're punishing or just watching. Feeding on pain we don't have to feel. There's an eerie detail in how often we disguise this as righteousness, accountability, transparency. But something deeper stirs under the words, a kind of thrill, a ritual satisfaction. In Japan, there's a concept called shame culture, where societal disapproval shapes behavior more than legal consequence. Not jail, but loss of face. And you realize, in a connected world, shame is faster than law. You sit down on a worn bench, the wood creaks under your weight. You imagine someone long ago sitting in this same place, watching someone else punished for a mistake. Maybe a crime, maybe just defiance, and maybe they deserved it. Or maybe not. That's the thing with crowds. They don't always know. You think of scarlet letters sewn to dresses, bells rung as lepers walked the streets, head shaving after wars, pain made visible to satisfy the collective need for balance. Now we screenshot, we circulate, we demand statements, and it all feels new, but it's not. Researchers still debate whether public punishment deters crime. Some say it keeps people in line. Others argue it just teaches secrecy, how to avoid being seen, rather than how to change. You wonder about the kids who are shamed in classrooms, the people mocked online for what they wear, how they speak, who they are. It feels casual now, fleeting. But pain lingers in ways we don't always see. And sometimes we volunteer for it. Reality shows, confessional content, pain offered like entertainment. People cry, fall, break down, and cameras zoom in. The ritual continues. We've just blurred the line between punishment and performance. You rise from the bench and walk to a metal plaque. It's rusted, barely legible, but you can make out a name, a date, a brief phrase, to be remembered. You wonder what for? A trial? A sacrifice? A mistake? The details are gone. Only the memory of being watched remains. In many indigenous cultures, wrongdoing wasn't punished publicly. It was resolved communally. The group would gather, not to humiliate, but to restore. A circle of listening, not spectacle. You wonder what we lost when we traded that for silence and shame. You pass through the square, your footsteps echoing softly. The pain here isn't yours, but it could have been, and might still be. Because we still build arenas, we still fill the stands, we still look. The only difference now is that the stage fits in your pocket, and the crowd never sleeps. You step away from the square, the air around you feeling cooler now, as if the memory of watching has passed, but left something behind. A quiet reverence. A hush that feels less like silence and more like respect. You notice, for the first time, that your hands are gently brushing your own clothing. Your sleeve, the stitching at your shoulder, a small button you hadn't noticed before. What are you wearing? And why? In ancient times, clothing was never just about protection from the cold. It was a signal of status, of grief, of belief, and sometimes it was more than fabric. It was memory. In early human societies, the clothes of the dead were often passed down, not as hand-me-downs, but as relics. A fur cloak worn by a grandfather might be worn by his grandson, not to remember him, but to keep him present, the scent of him, the shape of him, still there. You imagine someone wrapping themselves in a coat too large, sleeves dragging the ground, not out of fashion, but out of love. In Victorian England, people mourned in black for months, sometimes years. Gloves, hats, veils. Each stage of mourning had rules, and breaking them meant disrespect. You wore your grief like a badge, like a uniform. Now grief is quieter, but some still keep a shirt, a scarf, a scent on a jacket they refuse to wash. It's not superstition, it's connection. A quietly fascinating fact. Smell is our most emotionally powerful sense, more direct to memory than sight or sound. The olfactory nerve is tied closely to the amygdala and hippocampus, where emotions and memories live. That's why a whiff of someone's sweater can undo you, can make them feel present again. And so we wear them, literally. In some cultures, ashes of the deceased are pressed into lockets or mixed into ink for tattoos. In others, like in parts of Papua New Guinea, bones are ground into powder and kept in pendants. A way of holding the dead close, even when they're no longer here. You pass a window with clothes hanging behind glass. At first, they seem ordinary, shirts, robes, sandals. But as you look closer, you realize these are not outfits. They're echoes. Each one belonged to someone who never returned. And suddenly, you feel the weight of that. How much cloth can carry. There's an eerie detail in how museums preserve clothing. Not just for aesthetics, but because of the stories stitched into seams. A soldier's coat still bearing blood. A dancer's shoes worn through at the toes. A wedding veil with a torn edge. Each one says, I was here. And now we do something similar. We keep hoodies, hospital wristbands, concert t-shirts. Sometimes we can't explain why we keep them. But we do. Not because of how they look, because of what they survived. In Tibetan rituals, clothing of the dead is sometimes burned to release the soul. In others, it's gifted, as a blessing, as continuity. A child wears a parent's robe. A spouse wears a partner's ring on a chain. Symbols turned into skin. You touch your own wrist now. No bracelet. But you imagine one. Something that once belonged to someone else. Maybe you wore it for a while. Maybe you still do. Researchers still study how objects of attachment help people cope with loss. The closer the item is to the body, like clothing or jewelry, the more effective it is in easing grief. It becomes a kind of emotional prosthetic. You feel the person in the fabric. You become less alone. You think of closets unopened since a funeral, of shirts folded with too much care, of a jacket still hanging by the door as if its owner might return. And sometimes you wear it, not to forget, to remember. You walk past a mirror now, tall, rippling slightly in the breeze, like glass that has seen too much. And for a second, you don't quite recognize yourself. The face is yours, but the collar, the fit, the weight of the fabric feels like someone else's, someone you once knew, or someone you used to be. You blink, and the mirror is gone. You're walking again. You think about how we wear more than cloth. We wear traditions, we wear expectation, we wear stories, and sometimes we wear the past. Not to bury it, to carry it. The path curves gently now, leading you through low-hanging branches. Their leaves brush your shoulders like fingertips. The world grows quiet again. Not empty, but waiting. And then a scent drifts toward you. Sweet, smoky, slightly bitter. The unmistakable fragrance of something prepared, something cooked. You follow it without thinking. Hunger isn't always about the stomach. You arrive at a small clearing where a table, rough-hewn from stone or wood, sits beneath a canopy of stars. No plates, no silver, just offerings, carefully placed, dried fruit, a small bowl of rice, ashes in a cracked ceramic cup. It doesn't look like much, but this isn't about the food. This is about ritual. Eating has always been more than survival. It's communion, agreement, transformation, and sometimes it's sacred. In the ancient world, food wasn't just consumed. It was shared, with gods, with the dead, with the unknown. A piece of bread left out overnight. A sip of wine poured into the ground. A bite withheld, not for lack of appetite, but for reverence. In Aztec temples, rituals involved cakes made of blood and maize, eaten not to nourish the body, but to connect with the divine. In Christianity, believers consume the body and blood of Christ in the form of bread and wine. Symbolic, yes, but also visceral. Sacred ingestion. A quietly fascinating fact. In many cultures, the first bite of a meal is offered to someone else, a spirit, a guest, an ancestor. Psychologists suggest that this small act triggers a shift in perception, from self-centered survival to shared meaning. The food becomes more than calories, it becomes story. You sit at the edge of the table and imagine placing something of your own, a piece of fruit, a cup of tea, a memory. It feels natural, even if you've never done it before, because the act lives deep in you. Even today, we eat in ritual. Birthdays, weddings, funerals. We bring dishes to grieving families. We toast to the dead. We bake cakes not just for taste, but for tradition. Candles, sliced edges, shared silence. And sometimes, food becomes a form of offering without us realizing it. Think of how people leave meals on graves, or how in many Asian cultures, ghost festivals involve elaborate feasts, not for the living, but for wandering souls who need to feel remembered. You look down and imagine invisible guests at this table. Not scary, just present. Sitting quietly, remembering the taste of something they once loved. In parts of India, Shraddha ceremonies are held annually to honor ancestors. Meals are cooked without garlic or onion, meant to calm the spirit. Each dish has a reason, a lineage, a vibration. Even the act of fasting is a kind of offering. You give up food to sharpen your senses, to cleanse your spirit, to show devotion. In Ramadan, in Yom Kippur, in silent retreats, the absence becomes the point. Hunger becomes the vessel. There's an eerie detail in how certain foods are eaten only in sacred contexts. The body recognizes them. The bitter herbs, the fermented milk, the dried fish, and something shifts. You're not eating for pleasure. You're eating to remember. And maybe you felt it too. That sudden lump in your throat when you eat a dish from childhood. That flood of memory in a spice you haven't tasted in years. Researchers have shown that food memories are among the most emotionally durable we carry. The brain ties smell, taste, and nostalgia into a single thread, one that we follow again and again. Even a sip of broth can carry you home. You pass your fingers near a candle. The flame doesn't flicker. The offerings remain untouched, but not unwanted. Because the sacred doesn't need to consume. It only needs to be invited. You remember how in some indigenous cultures, the hunt itself was a ritual, prayers before the arrow was loosed, thanks whispered over fresh meat, bones returned to the earth, a promise to never take without giving. And yet, now, we eat fast, distracted, screens glowing beside our plates, but even then, something survives. The birthday candles, the clink of glasses, the whisper before the first bite, enjoy. A quiet echo of older altars. You rise from the table. You don't take anything, but you feel full somehow. Not in your stomach, in your chest, in the space behind your eyes. Food was never just food, it was a conversation with gods, with ghosts, and with yourself. You move again, gently, as if your steps might interrupt something invisible. The trees thin out, and a stone path emerges beneath your feet. Not modern, not ancient, but something in between. You follow it, your breath slow, your body loose, and yet there's a heaviness in the air now. Like waiting, like expectation. You're walking toward a place of sacrifice. Not the brutal, dramatic kind from history books. No flames, no blades, no spilled blood on ceremonial stones. But still, you feel it. That old weight. A place where something must be given up. We like to think sacrifice is behind us, a grim relic of the past. Aztec altars, Carthaginian fires, the ancient Hebrew temple, where lambs were offered in ritual, bones, smoke, and chants. But if you look closer, we've only changed the setting, not the story. In the modern world, we still give things up. Still surrender comfort, time, or pleasure for the sake of something greater. A goal, a belief, a future self. We don't call it sacrifice, we call it hustle, we call it discipline. But the root is the same. We give something to gain something. A quietly fascinating fact. The word sacrifice comes from the Latin sacrificium, meaning to make sacred, not to destroy, to transform, to offer. So maybe sacrifice was never about loss, but about meaning. You arrive at a clearing that feels intentional, a circle of smooth stones, charcoal lines on the ground, a few feathers maybe, or small bones. You're not sure if it's a shrine or a memory, but the feeling is clear. Something was left here, on purpose, and maybe not long ago. In ancient Greece, sacrifice was a negotiation, smoke rising to the gods, meat shared among the people. In a sense, it was practical, but also symbolic. You had to show you were willing to part with something. That's what made the prayer real. Today, we do the same in quieter ways. We sacrifice sleep for work, desire for discipline, time for others. And while it doesn't look like ritual, it feels like it. The alarm at 5 a.m., the missed dinner, the delayed dream. There's a kind of altar in every schedule. And yet, in many cultures, sacrifice was never purely voluntary. In some Incan traditions, children were offered to the mountain gods, prepared, dressed, fed like royalty in their final days. Archaeologists have found them frozen in high-altitude shrines, still intact, still serene. Their communities believe the children became messengers, intermediaries between this world and the next. It's eerie, it's tender, it's terrifying, but it was done out of devotion, not cruelty. You step inside the circle now. Just your feet. The air shifts slightly, warmer here, though no fire burns. You feel something under your heel. A thread? A strand of hair? You're not sure. You lift your foot, and you begin to wonder, what have you given up lately? What parts of yourself have you offered, willingly or not, to things you believe in? A relationship? A project? An identity? Researchers have studied what they call costly signaling. The idea that the more we sacrifice, the more serious we seem. People trust those who give up more, who bleed for their cause, figuratively or literally. The sacrifice proves sincerity. And so we brand ourselves. We fast. We work 16-hour days. We walk away from comfort, not always because we have to, but because we want to mean it. Even now, in politics, in love, in religion, sacrifice is the highest currency of belief. You think of parents who work themselves raw, artists who disappear into their craft, activists who burn out not because they failed, but because they gave too much. They became the offering. There's an eerie detail in how many modern sacrifices go unacknowledged. Invisible rituals. Someone skipping a meal to make rent. Someone biting their tongue to keep the peace. Someone leaving behind their own dream to raise someone else's. No altar, no witness, but real, just the same. You look around the clearing and feel a strange peace, a quiet understanding. This isn't a place of blood. It's a place of honesty, of recognizing what you've given and maybe what you've lost along the way. You kneel, just for a moment, not out of submission, but out of curiosity. If you could place something on this ground, some part of your fear, your hope, your past, what would it be? You don't need to answer. The question is enough. You rise again, brushing your hands off gently. And when you step out of the circle, you feel a little lighter. Not because you left something behind, but because you remembered what you're already carrying. Your footsteps take on a different rhythm now, slower, more grounded. Each step feels deliberate, like part of a ritual you can't name. The air carries a faint metallic ring, just out of reach, like the lingering sound of a bell that was struck long ago and still hums faintly beneath the world's noise. You follow it, and as you walk, you begin to notice something subtle. The absence of words. No chatter, no voices. Only that soft resonance, that near-silent vibration that seems to pull you inward. You arrive at a small structure, part temple, part ruin. Inside, a single bell hangs from a beam of dark wood. The rope below it is frayed, almost dust, but the bell remains, waiting. In almost every ancient civilization, bells or gongs were used not just for sound, but for meaning. They called people to prayer, marked time, signaled births and deaths. Their sound wasn't noise, it was invitation. In Buddhist temples, the bell is struck to awaken the mind. In Catholic churches, it calls the soul. In shamanic rites, it opens the space between worlds. The bell doesn't command, it clears. A quietly fascinating fact. Studies in acoustic therapy show that bell tones, especially deep, sustained ones, can slow brain waves, shifting the mind from beta, alert, to alpha or theta, relaxed, meditative. The body responds, even if the mind resists, a sound that literally unwinds you. You place your hand on the bell's side. It's cool, smooth, as if hundreds of hands before yours have touched it too, asking the same question without words. You don't ring it, not yet. Instead, you listen. And in that stillness, you realize the bell is not just for sound, it's for silence too. What it marks is not just the beginning, but the space that follows. In ancient Japan, temple bells are struck 108 times on New Year's Eve, one for each of the human desires that cloud the spirit. The sound washes the year away, not loudly but slowly. There's an eerie detail in how we still use bells to mark passage, even if we don't call it ritual. A bell at a school to start or end class. The chime of a phone. A clock tower striking midnight. Time shaped by sound. And maybe you've heard it too, that sudden ring that seems to come from nowhere. A quiet tone in your ear that makes you pause. No one else hears it, but something in you listens anyway. Some cultures believe that when you hear a phantom bell, it means a spirit is passing by, not necessarily watching, just moving through. You close your eyes and imagine all the sounds your body remembers. A parent calling your name, the rustle of pages, the beep of a hospital monitor, a song from a night you can't fully recall. And somewhere, behind all of them, the bell. In Tibetan traditions, bells are paired with vajras, symbolic thunderbolts. Together, they represent wisdom and compassion, sound and silence. The bell's tone clears illusion, opens the heart. You finally take the rope, gently, no force, and you give the bell a soft tug. It rings. Not loudly, not long, but deeply. You feel it in your chest, in your teeth, in the base of your spine, like something ancient shifting inside you, like a truth remembered, not learned. The tone lingers, and the world feels cleaner for a moment. You think about how even now, people ring bells for the dead, small handbells in hospice rooms, ship bells for lost sailors, tower bells for those gone too soon. We don't speak, we ring. Because some grief doesn't need words. Researchers still wonder why certain tones produce such emotional reactions. One theory is entrainment, where our brainwaves begin to sync with external rhythms. Another is memory encoding. That sound, being more primal than language, accesses the limbic system faster. But maybe the answer is simpler. Maybe bells remind us that something beyond language is always listening. You release the rope, the bell settles. The silence returns, but it feels changed now. Less like absence, more like presence. You turn and walk back into the trees. The leaves shift gently as you pass, as if stirred by sound that's already gone. And somewhere, deep in the distance, an echo. The path grows narrower now, curving through a canopy of branches that arch above like ribs. You move slowly, almost carefully, as if each step draws you deeper into a hidden layer of the world. The air brushes your skin with the softness of old cloth. You notice a thread on your sleeve, then another, and you begin to see them everywhere. delicate strands drifting through the air like spider silk, caught on leaves, wrapped around roots, clinging softly to your arms, strings, bindings. And you begin to remember. The body has always been wrapped, pressed, stretched, shaped, not for comfort, for meaning. Across cultures and centuries, binding the body was never just fashion, it was ritual, a way to express control, beauty, status, or devotion. You think of Egyptian mummies, carefully wrapped in linen, each fold an act of preparation for the afterlife. Or Chinese foot binding, where pain and permanence shaped a girl's entire destiny. It was never just about appearance. It was about belonging, to a time, to a system, to a belief. A quietly fascinating fact. In parts of Indonesia, the Toraja people practice a ritual called manene, where the dead are exhumed, cleaned, redressed in fresh clothes, and sometimes rewrapped in cloth. A ritual not of decay, but of continuity. The bindings renew the bond. You walk further and come upon a tree with cords wrapped tightly around its trunk. Red, white, black. Worn by weather, but still holding. You've seen this before, at shrines, at temples, in places where the living and the unseen overlap. Ties, not to restrict, but to protect. And you begin to think about the ways we bind ourselves, even now. You remember corsets, bandages, waist trainers, shapewear, uniforms, things designed to hold us in or hold us together, to make us presentable, appropriate, correct. And beyond the physical, words we wear, labels, names, roles. Sometimes they feel like threads tightening around the ribs. Sometimes we're not sure if we're being wrapped or restrained. There's an eerie detail in how early body bindings often started in childhood, long before consent, long before understanding. Skulls reshaped with boards, feet folded and bound, spines stiffened. These weren't acts of cruelty in their time. They were love, honor, ritual. Today, we do it differently. Braces, posture correctors, compression garments, fixing the body for its future. But the message remains, shape yourself to fit. You step into a clearing and suddenly notice figures made of cloth stand before you, stuffed loosely with straw, tied at the waist, at the neck, at the wrists. Not effigies exactly, more like memory statues. Some wear hoods, some don't. None have faces. You approach one gently, fingers grazing the knots around its arms. The cloth is soft, weathered, tied with care. You wonder who made them and why. In Japan, there are waraji dolls, straw figures burned in shrines to transfer bad luck or disease from a person into the doll. In Haiti, certain voodoo traditions bind small cloth figures not for curses, but for healing, to hold the pain safely outside the body. And in modern times, we still bind objects with meaning. Bracelets woven at summer camp, never removed. Red strings tied around the wrist for protection. Bandanas knotted with memory. Wedding dresses saved in closets, never to be worn again, but never thrown away. The threads hold something invisible. Researchers have explored enclothed cognition, the idea that what we wear shapes how we think. A person in a lab coat performs better on concentration tasks. A person in ritual robes reports a stronger sense of identity. It's not costume, it's belief made visible. And maybe you felt it too. How a certain outfit makes you walk differently, speak differently. How a uniform can erase your name, or give you a new one. You walk past the cloth figures, their shadows soft in the low light, and you feel the threads on your own arms again. Not tight, just present. You remember funerals where the body was wrapped in white, or births where a newborn was swaddled. Wrapping isn't always about silence. Sometimes it says, you are held. You look down and see a spool of thread on the ground, frayed, unwinding into the dirt. You don't pick it up, but you follow where it leads. Because not every binding is meant to restrain. Some are meant to connect. And this one, it feels like it's pulling you somewhere true. The thread leads you forward through the hush of trees until you reach an old gate. Not locked, just leaning as if waiting for someone to remember it. You step through gently and everything feels watched. Not in a threatening way, just seen. And then you notice them. Eyes, painted onto stone, carved into wood, woven into cloth banners that flutter without wind. Dozens, maybe hundreds. They're not realistic, not quite. Symbolic, stylized, unblinking. Some large and round, others narrow, slitted like a cat's. But all of them, open. You're in a place that remembers watchfulness. Since the beginning, humans have believed in the gaze, not just seeing, but being seen. Eyes as protection, eyes as power, eyes as portals, and sometimes as punishment. The ancient Egyptians painted the Eye of Horus on tombs and amulets, believing it would guard the soul's journey through death. In Greek mythology, Argus Panoptes, a giant with 100 eyes, was set to watch over sacred spaces, his many lids never all asleep at once. The eye meant vigilance. The eye meant memory. A quietly fascinating fact: the human brain reacts more strongly to images of eyes than to other facial features. In studies, even simple eye-like dots can cause people to alter their behavior, to act more ethically, more modestly. Just the suggestion of being watched is enough, and so we kept painting them. In Turkish culture, there's the nazar, a blue and white eye-shaped charm to ward off the evil gaze of others. People hang them on walls above cribs on the rearview mirrors of cars. Even today, many won't travel without one. You pass a stone basin, water still and dark. For a moment, it reflects your face, but not your eyes. The reflection stops just beneath them, like a mirror that doesn't want to know you too well. There's an eerie detail in how some ancient cultures believed the dead could see better than the living, that once freed from the body, their gaze could pierce illusions, lies, even time itself. That's why tombs were often adorned with eye motifs, to let the dead watch over the world they left behind. And maybe that's why we still feel them. You think about surveillance, cameras on street corners, phones that listen, glass buildings where every movement is recorded. We call it safety, but it feels like something older. Like the gods have traded their altars for algorithms. And yet, even without technology, people watch. Neighbors, strangers, social media. Every post, a performance. Every eye, a mirror. Researchers have discovered something they call the watching effect, the tendency for people to act with more honesty, generosity, or restraint when they believe they're being observed. It's deeply subconscious. Even a painted eye in a public space can reduce theft or vandalism. You glance again at the painted eyes on the stone. They're not judging, just holding space. And you think about your own gaze, the eyes you've turned away, the ones you've met too long. How looking at someone is a kind of invitation, a kind of vulnerability. In many indigenous cultures, eye contact isn't encouraged. It's seen as too intense, too intrusive. In others, it's the foundation of trust. To meet someone's gaze is to say, I'm here, I see you, I won't look away. And then there are mirrors, eyes that reflect rather than observe. You come to a circular piece of polished stone set into the earth. It doesn't show your whole body, just your eyes, floating in the dark like twin moons. And for a breath, you don't recognize them. Not because they're strange, but because they're older than you remember. What have they seen? What have they watched quietly, without understanding? What have they turned away from? You blink, and the reflection ripples. Gone. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are eyes painted on stupas, two giant staring forms that represent the Buddha's all-seeing nature. Below them is a third symbol, the question mark-shaped nose. Or is it a mystery? A reminder that even in total awareness, uncertainty remains? You step carefully between the painted stones now, each pair of eyes guiding you forward like silent sentinels. Not scolding, not welcoming, just aware. And you realize maybe being seen isn't about being understood. Maybe it's about being remembered, even when you're gone, even when you've changed, even when you've forgotten how to look at yourself. You reach a gate on the far side of the clearing, older than the first, overgrown with ivy. There are no eyes here, only the feeling of them, still open, still watching. You step beyond the gate and something shifts. Not the temperature, not the wind, something deeper. An invisible border has been crossed and the ground feels older here. Not in ruins, in memory. You're surrounded by symbols now, etched into bark, carved into stone, braided into strands of hair left behind in branches. All of them variations of the same idea. Blood. Not violence, not horror, but connection. For as long as we've existed, humans have treated blood as more than biology. It was sacred, binding, a signature stronger than ink, a seal more permanent than law. You walk past a stump that's been marked, not chopped, not burned, just stained, a faded red that never washed away. You don't need to ask why. In ancient times, blood oaths were common across the world. Two people might cut their palms, press them together, and promise something impossible to break. Friendship, loyalty, vengeance. The bond was physical, visible, alive. And even now, the phrase lingers. Blood brothers. A quietly fascinating fact, human blood carries unique scent compounds, subtle, but enough for dogs to distinguish individuals. Some researchers believe early humans could also recognize kin through the smell of blood, a sensory signature woven into us long before names. You arrive at a stone altar, low to the ground, covered in moss. It doesn't frighten you. It feels forgotten, not malevolent. On its surface, small rust-colored streaks remain, like lines on a palm. You trace one with your fingertip, and for a moment, you feel tethered. We still use blood to mark life's thresholds. The first drop from a newborn, the monthly flow in adolescence, the shared blood in childbirth, the drained blood in death. At every crossing point, the body speaks, sometimes with joy, sometimes with pain. There's an eerie detail in how certain rituals asked for blood not to harm, but to open. In the Philippines, some tribes believed a drop of blood on a written prayer could bind it more tightly to the divine. In Northern Europe, warriors would offer a few drops to the earth before battle, not to bribe, but to announce themselves. You pass a small bowl tucked in a tree's hollow. Dried leaves inside, ashes, something like rust. You don't need to know exactly what it is. You understand what it means. Something was given, and not lightly. Even in science, blood holds a kind of mystery. It regenerates itself. It carries the blueprint of the body. DNA, oxygen, trauma, immunity, all in one crimson river. Researchers still don't fully understand why emotional trauma can sometimes trigger immune responses, or why certain wounds, physical or emotional, refuse to clot. You think of blood drives, of hospitals, of that cold touch of antiseptic and needle, the bag filling slowly with something warm, irreplaceable. We give it away to save someone we'll never meet, a stranger's life carried inside you, and yet we never question it, because we understand. Blood, once offered, creates obligation. In ancient Rome, gladiators' blood was believed to carry power. People would collect it after the fight, for strength, for fertility, even as medicine. The idea wasn't grotesque, it was reverent. Today, we rarely speak of blood outside the clinical, but it still shows up in language. Bloodline. Bad blood. My own flesh and blood. Every phrase reminds you, we're made of history. You walk further and notice handprints on the cave wall, dark red, some faded, some bold, left by hands long gone. Not artwork, not warning, just presence. I was here. I gave. You press your hand beside one, not matching it, just acknowledging it. Your skin feels cool against the stone. You think about family, the one you were born into, the one you chose, the one you've built. Some of those ties feel unbreakable. Others feel like old scars. But all of them live somewhere beneath the skin. Researchers have shown that emotional closeness can actually synchronize biological rhythms, breathing, heart rate, even brain waves. You bleed with someone long enough, metaphorically or not, and your body starts to echo theirs. You sit for a moment, letting that settle. Maybe blood was never about violence. Maybe it was always about remembrance. The way it keeps flowing, even after everything else stops, you rise, and behind you the stone altar waits, not demanding, just holding space, because some ties are chosen, and some are written in blood. The path curves inward now, toward the quietest part of the forest. The air grows still, almost weightless, as if sound itself has been paused. You walk slower without meaning to. Your feet make no sound on the earth. It feels like a dream you're almost ready to leave, but not quite yet. In many ancient traditions, forgetting wasn't a failure. It was a ritual. To forget was to let go, to release the weight of a moment, or a year, or a lifetime. In Greece, the dead were said to drink from the river Lethe, the waters of forgetting, before crossing into the afterlife. Memory was not something they carried with them. It was something they left behind. You reach a shallow stream now. Its water is so clear, it reflects nothing, not even the stars. It simply flows, gentle, directionless, like a thought just beyond grasp. You kneel and watch it. You don't drink, but you understand. You remember that even now, we find ways to forget deliberately, burning journals, tossing letters, letting photos fade in the sun. We call it moving on, closure, healing. But deep down, it's something older, a way to unbind what memory keeps too tightly wound. A quietly fascinating fact: sleep plays a powerful role in memory pruning. Every night, your brain decides which memories to keep and which to gently let go. The ones you never revisit fade, not out of neglect, but out of necessity. You touch the surface of the stream, it ripples without resistance. There's an eerie detail in how some cultures required forgetfulness before renewal. In parts of West Africa, initiation rites included long periods of isolation, fasting, even sensory deprivation. Not to harm, but to unmake the self so it could be remade. You think of moments in your life you've chosen not to remember, not because they weren't important, but because they took too much. We talk often about what we hold on to, but what about what we let go? In Japan, there's a ceremony called Osuji, the Great Cleaning, held at the end of each year. Families clear out dust, clutter, broken items, but it's more than tidying. It's symbolic forgetting, a sweeping away of old energies, unspoken griefs. You rise again, walking now through what feels like the edge of memory itself. Trees become silhouettes, stones become shapes, the landscape softens, like fog rolling over something once sharp. And you think about rituals of release, saying someone's name for the last time, replaying a voicemail and then deleting it, walking away from a place without turning back. These acts feel small, but inside they echo with something ceremonial. The body knows when a chapter closes, even if the mind tries to cling. Researchers still wonder why some people seem to forget more easily than others. Is it chemistry? Trauma? Will? But maybe forgetting is a skill, one passed down through centuries of unspoken traditions, a wisdom written into the nervous system. You arrive at a small structure, not a temple, not a home, just a space. Inside, bundles of dried herbs hang from the ceiling. Lavender, sage, mugwort, plants used for centuries to clear energy, ease grief, prepare the body for transition. There is no fire, no chant, just a place where things are laid down. You kneel once more, not to ask, not to offer, just to let go. And as you sit in stillness, something inside you softens. Not erased, just allowed to fade. A face, perhaps. A voice. A version of yourself no longer needed. You feel it drift from you like smoke. You don't need to chase it. You don't even need to understand. Because the ritual has already begun. You stay like that for a while. Breathing, not thinking. Letting your body do what it's always known how to do. Remember the important things. And gently release the rest. The air is cool now and very still. No more footsteps. No more paths. Just the soft hush of the night, pressing gently at the edges of thought. You've wandered through forgotten places, old beliefs, strange echoes of rituals long buried, but never quite gone. And maybe, without realizing it, you've recognized some of them in yourself, not as relics, but as instincts, a whisper of something older than reason. You don't need to understand everything you've seen. The point was never to solve, only to feel, to drift, to remember that even in the quiet, even in the dark, you are part of something vast, a long chain of strange beauty. And now, it's time to let the journey rest. The stories can settle, the symbols can fade, and you can just float. That's all for tonight. Let your mind keep wandering if it wants. Let the images soften. Let the sleep find you, gently and without rush. I'll be here again next time.